Hey there. Tonight, we're stepping into a different kind of story. Not the shining legend, but the cold, heavy truth beneath the armor. You won't find dragons here or flawless heroes. Just a life built on duty, fear, bruises, and the quiet grind of surviving in steel through battlefields, broken sleep, and the slow fade of glory. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it actually brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off to the same slow march through history. So dim the lights. Let the fire in your imagination warm the stone walls. Settle in, and let's begin with the making of a knight. Imagine you're a young boy, not old enough to really understand what's happening, but old enough to remember your mother's face, or at least what you think her face looked like. A man in fine clothes arrives at your home. He's representing the local nobleman. There's a conversation between him and your parents that happens in low voices, mostly words you don't understand. Then he looks at you and smiles, but it's not a warm smile. Within a week, you're gone. Not dead, not running away. You've been sent to the castle to begin your training as a page. Your parents tell you it's an honor. The man in fine clothes tells you it's an opportunity. Everyone tells you that someday, if you survive and prove yourself, you'll become a knight. A real knight, with a sword and armor and land and glory. Nobody tells you the rest. Nobody tells you about the decades of pain. Nobody tells you about the psychological weight that accumulates like rust on old steel. Nobody tells you that the glory is purchased with suffering so comprehensive that most people in your era simply didn't have words for it. This is not a glamorous story. This is not a tale of shining quests and noble deeds. This is a story that historians whisper about in dusty libraries, that physical anthropologists piece together from skeleton studies, that medieval records hint at but never quite explicitly describe. This is what it actually felt like to be a medieval knight, from the perspective of a person living through it. A perspective we don't usually get because nobody survived long enough to write extensive memoirs about their trauma. But we can reconstruct it. Through medical records, through burial studies, through the physical evidence left behind, through the fragments of letters and diaries that survived, and through basic human physiology and psychology, we can understand what this life actually meant. Let's start at the beginning. You're 7 years old, maybe 6. You don't have much agency in your own destiny. Your parents have either decided to send you away because they're ambitious and want a family connection to nobility, or because they genuinely can't afford to feed another child, and this solved the problem. Either way, you're at a castle. The journey takes days. You've never been more than a few miles from home. Now you're traveling further than that, leaving behind everything familiar. The people you know, the places you recognize, the rhythm of your home. And you're too young to fully comprehend that this is permanent, that you won't be going back. When you arrive at the castle, the first thing that hits you is the scale. You've never seen anything like it. Stone walls that seem to stretch into the sky. Towers that actually touch clouds. Gates so large that horses need to be led through carefully. This is not a home. This is a fortress. A prison made of stone. You're brought to the kitchens. This is where pages spend most of their time in their first years. Not because they're teaching you anything about being a knight. They're not. They're using you as cheap labor. You're small. You can fit into spaces adults can't. Your hands are delicate enough for certain tasks. Your labor costs nothing except food. For the first month, you carry water. All day, from dawn until well past when the sun sets. You carry heavy wooden buckets, filled with water that splashes onto your clothes. Your arms ache in a way you've never experienced before. It's not the ache of play or of working in fields. It's the ache of repetitive strain, of muscles being used in ways they were never designed to be used, of small bones and growing hands being forced to grip too tightly for too long. Your hands develop blisters, then calluses over those blisters. Then the skin between your fingers cracks from constant moisture. You see other boys with the same injuries at various stages of healing. Some of them have scars on their hands from accidents, burns from steam, cuts from broken buckets. One boy is missing the tip of his ring finger. He tells you a bucket fell on it. You don't ask for details. You sleep in the servants' quarters, which is a large room below ground. It's cold here, perpetually damp. There are maybe 20 boys your age or slightly older, all sleeping on straw pallets crammed into the space. The smell is overwhelming. Sweat, mildew, human waste from the single latrine bucket that's emptied maybe once a day. The air is thick and hard to breathe. Winter makes it worse because the room never gets truly warm. Summer makes it worse because the smell becomes unbearable and the heat doesn't help. You never sleep well. The boy next to you kicks in his sleep. Another snores. Someone is always moving or coughing or whimpering from nightmares. You learn to sleep in fragments, an hour here, 20 minutes there. It's enough to survive on, barely. The food is inadequate. Bread and thin soup mostly. On rare days, there's meat in the soup. You learn to eat quickly without tasting it, because if you don't finish fast enough, other boys will steal it. Food security becomes your first priority. You learn to find hidden places to store extras. You befriend the cook's assistant, who might slip you scraps. You steal from the kitchen when you can do it without getting caught. Getting caught means punishment, and punishment in a medieval kitchen means burns or cuts or being struck with whatever implement the adult is holding at the time. Within months, you're noticeably thinner than you were when you arrived. Your clothes hang off your frame. Your cheekbones become pronounced. Your energy is low. This is your baseline now. This is just what existing feels like. Around age 8 or 9, you graduate to other tasks. You're assigned to help the stable hands. Now you're shoveling horse manure, cleaning tack, hauling hay. It's slightly more skilled work than carrying water, which means slightly higher status among the boys. But it's also more physically demanding. You're learning about horses, which is necessary for your future as a knight, but it doesn't feel like learning. It feels like work. Horses are not friendly creatures. They're large, strong, and they don't care about you. You learn this when a horse steps on your foot, and you think it's broken. It's not. You can still walk, but you learn to be more careful. You learn to read a horse's mood by its ears, its posture. You learn which horses are unpredictable and which are merely indifferent. You learn that a horse that's angry can kill you without even trying. This becomes background knowledge, like knowing that heights are dangerous. You just accept it and move on. You observe the older boys. Some of them are in their early teens now, and they've started actual weapons training. They're learning to use swords, to ride horses, to understand combat. You watch them from a distance, wondering if you'll make it that far. Some of the boys who arrive with you are already gone. You don't know where they went. Sent home? Sold to another household? Dead? Nobody explains. You just notice they're not there one day. Around age 10, you start learning basic literacy. This happens because the castle needs clerks and administrators, and a few of the more promising boys are selected. You're one of them, either because you seem intelligent or because the scribe simply needs an assistant, and you are convenient. You're taught to read and write in Latin and in the local language, though mostly Latin. It's tedious. The scribe is not patient. He hits your hands with a stick when you make mistakes. Your fingers hurt constantly, both from the writing and from the punishment. But literacy is becoming a useful skill, so you persist. The hitting is normal now. You've been hit so many times that you barely register it. Not as trauma. That's too sophisticated a concept for you at this age. It's just part of the environment, like the cold or the hunger. Adults hit you when you're slow. Adults hit you when you make mistakes. Adults hit you when they're in bad moods. The hitting happens, and then you keep working. You learn not to cry because crying makes it worse. You learn to absorb blows without flinching because that provokes more. You learn to make yourself small and quiet and unobtrusive. This is the beginning of emotional numbness, the ability to absorb injury and keep functioning, the ability to disconnect from pain. These are valuable skills for a medieval knight. This is why boys are trained this way. Not because the adults are uniquely cruel, but because they're trying to prepare you for a life where pain is constant and you need to keep functioning regardless. By age 12, you're no longer technically a page. You're transitioning to squirehood. You're assigned to a specific knight now. Your job is to serve him completely. You clean his armor. You maintain his weapons. You help him dress. You prepare his meals. You care for his horses. You manage his equipment. You are his personal servant, except that you're also being trained to become him. The knight you're assigned to is named Sir Aldwin. He's about 40 years old, which is relatively old for a knight. He has scars on his face and hands. He moves deliberately, like someone whose body has learned not to make unnecessary motions. His eyes are the color of gray stone, and they don't seem to look at you so much as through you. On your first day, he explains the arrangement. Your job is to keep me alive. If my armor is damaged and I die because of it, I will kill you before I die. If my weapons aren't sharp and I die because of it, I will kill you first. If my horse is unprepared and I die because of it, I will definitely kill you, because that would be unforgivable. Do you understand? You nod. You understand perfectly. For the next several years, your entire existence revolves around Sir Aldwin. You wake when he wakes. You eat when he eats. You sleep when he sleeps, usually in an adjacent chamber, so you're immediately available if he needs something in the night. Your life is completely subsumed into his. This is where the serious training begins. Not the training of teaching you to fight, though that's part of it. The training of teaching you to endure, to never complain, to function through pain and exhaustion and hunger, to prioritize your knight's needs above your own survival. You learn to maintain his armor. Chain mail first. Hundreds of interlocking rings that need to be cleaned, oiled, checked for damage. One broken ring becomes a weak point that could kill him in battle. So you inspect each ring individually. It takes hours. Your eyes hurt from the close work. Your fingers ache from the repetitive motion. But you do it every single day. Armor that's been used in training needs immediate attention. Armor that's been rained on needs to be dried and oiled to prevent rust. Armor that's been in storage needs to be checked for deterioration. When plate armor becomes more common, the work becomes slightly less tedious but more technically complex. You need to understand the joints, the articulations, the rivets. You need to know if an armor piece is properly fitted or if it needs adjustment. You need to understand the principle of how armor deflects blows rather than absorbing them. A dent in the wrong place can be catastrophic. You're not taught this systematically. You learn by doing and being corrected. When you miss something, Sir Aldwin notices immediately and points it out with anger. His disappointment is worse than his anger. You come to fear disappointing him more than you fear his anger, because the anger happens quickly and then it's over. The disappointment lingers. Weapons maintenance is similar. His primary weapon is a long sword, about 5 feet long, weighing around 3 to 4 pounds. You learn the weight distribution, the balance point, the angle at which it cuts most effectively. You learn that sharpening a sword is a skill that takes years to master. You can break the blade if you're not careful. You can create weak points that will cause the blade to shatter in combat. So you do it carefully, repeatedly, until you can do it without thinking. His secondary weapons rotate depending on the season and the expected use. Sometimes it's a mace, which is brutal and simple, a weighted head on a handle. Sometimes it's an axe, which requires different maintenance. Sometimes it's a lance for jousting, which is huge and requires special storage. Each weapon has its own requirements, its own maintenance schedule, its own temperament. You learn that weapons are living things in a metaphorical sense. They need care. They need respect. They need to be treated properly, or they'll fail you. A sword that's been neglected will have a dull edge. A dull edge in battle is the difference between killing and dying. So you never neglect a weapon. Around age 15, you're actually trained in combat. This starts with wooden swords and padded armor. It starts with learning basic stances and movements. It starts with understanding how to move in the armor you'll eventually wear full-time. Sir Aldwin teaches you himself initially, then introduces you to the Master-at-Arms who trains all the squires. The Master-at-Arms is a man named Gareth, probably his 50s, with missing eye and no fingers on his left hand. He is not patient. He does not believe in gentle instruction. His philosophy is that if a movement doesn't come naturally to you after he shows it once, you need more practice. And practice means repetition until your muscles remember without your mind having to direct them. You drill for hours. Thrust and parry. Slash and block. Footwork to maintain balance. footwork to create distance, footwork to close distance. Your muscles burn. Your hands blister even through padded gloves. Your shoulders scream. Your legs feel like they're going to collapse. And then Gareth hits you with a wooden training sword because you were too slow on your last parry. This is when you start developing the trauma response to pain that would define the rest of your life. You learn that pain doesn't mean stop. Pain means keep going. Pain is information, not a signal to cease activity. Your body learns to process pain differently. The nerves are still firing, but your brain learns to ignore them, to relegate them to background noise. This is a cost. Years of ignoring pain signals means that by the time you're in your 30s, you won't notice when an infection is becoming serious, won't recognize warning signs of illness, won't respond appropriately to your body's distress signals. The ability to push through pain is valuable in a warrior. It's catastrophic in a person trying to maintain their health. But you don't know that yet. Right now, you just know that you're learning to not flinch when struck. That's progress. You start learning to ride properly at around 16. You've handled horses for years, but riding in armor, riding while wielding weapons, riding while fighting, that's different. It's like learning to walk all over again. Your center of gravity is completely different in armor. Your balance is affected. Your range of motion is limited. The horse can sense your uncertainty. Medieval war horses are not the gentle creatures of fairy tales. They're bred for strength and power. They're temperamental. They don't like having a metal-covered human climb on their backs. They especially don't like the weight and the noise and the strange sensations. Training a horse for warfare is as much about breaking its spirit as it is about teaching it obedience. You observe this process. You watch horses that are beautiful and strong become subdued. You watch their resistance wear down through repetition and punishment. You watch them stop fighting and simply accept their fate. It's disturbing in ways you can't quite articulate, but this is necessary. A horse that won't tolerate armor, weapons, and combat isn't useful. When you finally mount a war horse yourself, even in controlled conditions with a trainer nearby, the fear is overwhelming. This animal is so large, so powerful, so capable of killing you with a single unexpected movement. You could fall and break your neck. The horse could panic and throw you. Everything feels unstable and dangerous, but you keep riding because this is your job now, because refusing is not an option, because you're learning to ignore fear the same way you've learned to ignore pain. By 17, you're fully integrated into Sir Aldwin's household. You're not quite a man yet, but you're no longer a boy either. You're something in between, stronger than you were, harder than you were, but still juvenile in many ways. Your beard is starting to grow in, making you look older than you are. Your voice has dropped. Your shoulders have broadened from years of training. You've forgotten what your mother looked like. You can't quite remember her voice anymore. Your home feels like a dream that happened to someone else. This castle is your real home now. Sir Aldwin is your real family now. The other squires are your brothers. You've also learned something about mortality. One of the boys who arrived with you, a squire named Thomas who was assigned to another knight, died last year from an infected wound. He'd been cut during training. The infection spread. He went delirious with fever. He died screaming, essentially. You were in the next room, and you heard it. The sound of a boy becoming a man, becoming a corpse. This is normal. This is just how the world works. People get infected. People die. You don't have names for most infections. You just know that sometimes they can be treated, and sometimes they can't. Thomas couldn't be. You're aware now that you might die. Not eventually, in some distant abstract future. Actually die. In the next 5 years. Before you become a knight. Before you ever see combat. From an infection or an accident or disease you pick up in a castle. This knowledge sits in the back of your mind. It's not paralyzing because you're trained not to be paralyzed by things you can't control. But it's there, a constant low-level awareness that your life is fragile and that violence can end it at any moment. Let's talk about the armor. You've been maintaining it and wearing training versions of it. But now, at 17 or 18, you're going to wear real armor. Full plate. The kind that costs more than most people and the kingdom earn in 5 years. Putting it on is a process. It takes probably 30 minutes with help. First, you put on an undershift, a linen shirt that goes down to your knees. Then a padded gambeson that's quilted with layers of linen and wool, maybe 4 inches thick at the padding. Then the actual armor starts. Greaves for your legs, sabatons for your feet, a cuirass for your torso, a breastplate and a backplate riveted together, pauldrons for your shoulders, vambraces for your forearms, gauntlets for your hands, a gorget to protect your neck. Then finally the helmet, a heavy metal bowl that covers your head completely except for a narrow slit for vision. The total weight is somewhere between 60 and 90 pounds, depending on the specific armor. That's roughly equivalent to a large dumbbell strapped to your entire body. Except the dumbbell is uniform weight. Armor distributes weight unevenly. Your shoulders bear the brunt of it. Your neck is supporting a significant amount of weight from the helmet. The weight pulls on your spine. When you first put on a full suit of plate armor, you're shocked. You knew armor was heavy. You've been wearing partial armor for training for years. But nothing prepares you for the actual sensation of being completely enclosed. It's claustrophobic. It's hot. Your ability to move is severely limited. You take a step, and the movement feels alien. Your balance is off. Your sense of where your limbs are in space is disrupted. You've been training with armor on. You understand the biomechanics intellectually, but experiencing it is different. It's overwhelming. And this is not combat. This is standing in the courtyard with Sir Aldwin watching you adjust to a full suit of armor for the first time. You're not actually fighting anything. You're barely moving. And you're already starting to feel claustrophobic and panicked. Sir Aldwin is patient. Surprisingly, he remembers being you. He takes you through movements deliberately. Walk, turn, kneel, get up from kneeling, raise your arms, lower them, pivot from the waist. Each movement requires thought. Each movement requires significant effort because the armor is fighting you. After about 2 hours, you take the armor off. The relief is extraordinary. The weight lifts and you feel like you're floating. But underneath where the armor sat, you're covered in sweat. Your skin is red and chafed. There are welts where straps have pressed into your flesh. You're slightly bruised where the armor has transferred force from external impacts. This will change, Sir Aldwin says. In a month, you won't notice the weight. In 6 months, you'll feel naked without it. In a year, you'll move in armor like you move without it. But that month, that's going to be brutal. He's not exaggerating. That month is brutal. You wear armor while training for hours every day. Your muscles scream. Your joints ache. You develop blisters where the armor rubs against your skin. You're constantly moving the armor slightly, trying to reduce pressure points. The chafing becomes so severe that you develop open wounds under the padding. Infections set in. You're fighting against the armor constantly, trying to make it work instead of against you. But Sir Aldwin is right. By the end of the month, your body has adapted. Your muscles have adjusted to the weight distribution. Your joints have learned how to move within the constraints. The pain fades from acute agony to chronic dull ache. You can wear armor for 8 hours without it being completely overwhelming. And then Sir Aldwin increases your training time to 10 hours a day. Because armor in training is one thing. Armor during an actual tournament or battle will be worse. Your body needs to be tougher than this. This is where you start understanding the price of being a knight. It's not the price you pay in combat. It's the price you pay in your body's ongoing deterioration just from the equipment itself. Here's what happens to a body that wears 60 to 90 pounds of armor regularly. Your spine starts to curve. The weight of the armor, distributed primarily across your shoulders, compresses your vertebrae over time. Your natural spinal curve becomes exaggerated. By the time you're in your 40s, you'll be noticeably bent forward at the shoulders. It's not dramatic, but it's visible. You'll be shorter at 60 than you were at 20 from spinal compression. Your shoulders and neck develop chronic pain. The muscles that support the weight develop, knots that don't ever completely release. Years of this eventually create permanent muscle damage. By your 50s, you'll have chronic neck pain that radiates down your arms. It will hurt to sleep. It will hurt to move. It will hurt to exist. Your knees get destroyed. The impact of riding horses for hours every day, combined with the weight of armor, damages your knee cartilage. Medieval knights had arthritis in their knees by their 40s, not mild arthritis. Severe arthritis that makes it painful to walk and nearly impossible to kneel. Your ankles and feet suffer similarly. The weight pulls everything down. The constant impact from walking and riding wears away cartilage. Bunions develop from the constant pressure. Your arches fall. By your 50s, walking more than a mile will cause significant pain. Your hips are stressed by years of riding horses. The motion of riding wears on the ball and socket joint. Medieval knights developed hip problems early. Bone spurs develop. The joint becomes inflamed. Again, by your 40s or 50s, walking and riding both become painful. But this is just from wearing the armor. This is before we even talk about actual combat injuries. Combat injuries in medieval times are different from what modern people imagine. Swords don't necessarily cut the way movies depict them. A sword blade is not infinitely sharp. Impact matters more than sharpness. A sword strike transfers force. If it doesn't cut all the way through the armor, the force still transfers to your body. The impact can break bones inside intact skin. It can cause internal bleeding. It can cause organs to fail from the trauma. And cuts do happen. Armor has weak points, the armpits behind the knees, the joints. Experienced fighters aim for these. A cut in the armpit can sever the brachial artery. You'll bleed out in minutes. A cut behind the knee will hit the popliteal artery. Again, you'll bleed to death quickly. A cut to the face, if the helmet visor is open, can blind you or kill you depending on the angle. Blunt force weapons, maces and hammers, don't cut, but they cause devastating injury. A mace strike can crush bones even inside armor. It can cause catastrophic internal injuries. You can be unhurt on the outside and dying internally from a mace strike. Medieval physicians couldn't treat internal bleeding. You just die slowly and agonizingly. But here's the thing. Most medieval combat injuries aren't immediately fatal. They're serious but survivable. A sword cut to the arm causes massive bleeding and pain, but if you get treatment, you might survive. A mace strike breaks ribs but doesn't necessarily kill you. You can limp away from combat with serious injuries and survive if you get medical care. The problem is medieval medical care. There are no antibiotics. There's no way to treat infection. A wound that gets infected will likely kill you. About 30 to 40% of wounds become infected. Of those infections, the majority are fatal. You don't die from the cut. You die from the infection. Medieval surgeons can amputate limbs. They can drain abscesses. They can set bones. But they can't cure infections. The best they can do is hope your body's immune system is strong enough. For most people, infected wounds are death sentences. You learn about this viscerally in your late teens. You watch a squire get cut during training. It's not even serious. A slash across the arm that opens it up but misses the major arteries. The squire gets the wound treated. A surgeon cleans it and stitches it shut. For the first few days, it seems fine. The squire complains about pain and soreness, but it's healing. Then, about a week later, the wound starts getting hot, red, swollen. Pus starts draining. The squire develops a fever. The fever gets higher. The squire becomes delirious. You watch a healthy 18-year-old boy turn into a corpse over the course of 5 days. The infection spread despite attempts to treat it. There was nothing anyone could do. This becomes your constant background anxiety. Any wound might be the one that kills you. You could survive a lance strike to the chest. You could survive a sword cut that bleeds heavily. But if you develop an infection, you're probably dead. There's nothing anyone can do about it. You just have to hope. At 19 years old, Sir Aldwin is called to serve in a military campaign. A neighboring lord is rebelling against the crown. The king needs soldiers. Sir Aldwin is needed. So you pack equipment and you prepare for actual war. A war campaign is not a battle. A battle is the actual fighting. A campaign is weeks or months of traveling and camping and waiting, punctuated by occasional actual combat. Most of a campaign is boring and miserable. Some of it is terrifying. The march to the conflict takes 2 weeks. You're traveling with a company of maybe 100 knights, plus their squires and servants. You're all on horseback or walking alongside horses. You have supply carts carrying food and equipment. You have horses carrying armor and weapons. It's a massive, slow-moving column. The smell is overwhelming. With 100 knights and their associated retinue, you're looking at several hundred people, all of them sweating, all of them wearing clothes they've been wearing for weeks without washing, all of them using the same general area as a latrine. The smell accumulates. It's a physical presence. You can almost taste it. The food is terrible. You eat hard bread that's sometimes moldy. You eat salted meat that's so old it's questionable whether it's still edible. You eat dried peas that require hours of cooking to become even slightly digestible. You're constantly hungry. By the end of the first week, your stomach is complaining constantly. By the end of the second week, you become accustomed to the hunger to the point that you barely notice. You don't bathe the entire march. You piss in the bushes. You defecate in designated areas away from camp. You don't change your clothes. The clothes you wore on day 1 are the same clothes you're wearing on day 14. They're covered in sweat and dirt and worse. They stink. Your skin itches constantly from dirt buildup. You develop rashes in places that rub constantly. You're infested with lice by day 3 or 4. Lice are disgusting, but also just part of existence. Scratching them gives temporary relief, but you can't get rid of them. Scratching creates open wounds. The open wounds get infected. You meet other knights who've been scratching so hard they've created serious infections. One knight had to have his arm wrapped because he'd scratched it open so severely. You arrive at the siege location and immediately understand that this is different from training. The walls of the castle you're sieging are actually tall. The soldiers inside are actually trying to kill you. The stakes are actually life and death. A siege is a waiting game. You establish a perimeter around the castle and prevent anyone from leaving or entering. You set up siege weaponry, catapults and trebuchets that lob large stones or flaming projectiles at the walls. You dig trenches. You maintain a constant presence. And you wait for the castle to run out of supplies or for breaches to form in the walls. Sieges last weeks or months or even years in famous cases. This one lasts about 6 weeks. For 6 weeks, you're living in a military camp. Your tent is small and leaks when it rains. You sleep on the ground. The food doesn't improve. The sanitation doesn't improve. The lice don't leave you. Periodically, the defenders attempt a sortie. They rush out of the castle trying to break the siege. When this happens, sudden combat erupts. You're not expecting it. You're in a state of mind where you're bored and uncomfortable and not fully alert. And then suddenly there are soldiers coming at you and you have to be ready to fight. These skirmishes are terrifying. This is actual combat. People are actually trying to kill you. The chaos is overwhelming. You're trained, but training doesn't prepare you for the randomness of actual warfare. You're trying to remember your training while also not dying. It's cognitively too much. During one of these skirmishes, you see a knight from your company get struck by a lance. The lance goes through a gap in his armor, the weak point where his shoulder meets his arm. The lance goes through, and the knight falls off his horse. He lands badly and doesn't get up. Other soldiers swarm him. He's still moving, trying to defend himself, but there are too many. He's stabbed and hit until he stops moving. You watch this happen. You're close enough to see the details. You're not close enough to help. All you can do is keep fighting and try not to be the next one who goes down. The siege ends when a section of wall finally gives way. Your sappers have been undermining the foundations, and finally the wall collapses. The gate breaches. Your soldiers pour through. The defenders have 2 choices: surrender or die. Most of them surrender. When you enter the castle, you see what a prolonged siege does. The defenders are starving. They're sick. They're traumatized. Many of them are children, conscripted into service or simply living in the castle with their families. You see a girl who can't be more than 10 years old, hollow-eyed and covered in dirt. The aftermath of a siege is where the real horror happens. Soldiers are let loose on a conquered castle. They're violent. They're angry. They're intoxicated on victory and adrenaline. They rape and murder and burn without restraint. You watch your fellow soldiers do things you didn't know humans were capable of. You don't participate. Sir Aldwin forbids it for reasons that might be moral or might just be practicality. But you don't stop them either. You can't stop them. There are too many. They would just kill you. This is war. Not the clean, honorable thing you were taught about. Not the noble struggle between good and evil. Just horror and brutality and trauma. Part 4. The toll. What happens to your mind? You survive the siege. You return to your home castle with Sir Aldwin's company. You have new scars. You've killed people. You've seen things that don't make sense in a moral framework. You know people who are dead. You know how easily death happens. How random it is. You don't sleep well anymore. When you do sleep, you have nightmares. You relive moments from a siege. You see the knight getting struck by the lance over and over. You see faces of people you killed or that you assume you killed. In the chaos, you're not always sure. Sir Aldwin seems normal. He eats. He sleeps. He goes about his duties. You asked him about this once. Quietly, try and understand how he's not falling apart the way you are. He looks at you for a long time. Then he says, you learn to put in a box in your mind. You acknowledge what happened. You accept that it happened. And then you put in the box and you don't think about it. You can't think about it. If you let yourself think about it all the time, you'll go mad. So you learn to exist with the knowledge in a sealed box. You try this. It sort of works. You can function, but the box isn't perfect. Things leak out. Random moments trigger memories. A smell, a sound, the way light hits something. And suddenly you're back in the siege, experiencing it again. You're drinking more now. Wine mostly, sometimes ale. There's a lot of alcohol at the castle. You drink in the evenings to help you sleep. The alcohol helps. It numbs things. It makes the box thicker and more impermeable. Of course, the next morning you feel terrible, headaches, nausea. But at least you slept. You're becoming aware of patterns in the other nights. Some of them drink heavily. Some of them are volatile. They explode in anger at minor provocations. Some of them seem to have withdrawn from reality entirely, going through life mechanically, but not actually present. Some of them have weird habits, collecting things, obsessive routines that don't seem necessary. You realize that everyone here is damaged. Everyone who's been in combat is carrying wounds that don't show. The psychological injuries are invisible, but they're there. Some people have learned to manage them better than others. Some people have more resilience or different trauma responses. But everyone is damaged. This becomes normal. This is just what life is like. You're broken. Everyone is broken. You function anyway. At 21, you're deemed ready for full knighthood. There's a ceremony. The local bishop comes. Nobles gather. You're presented with a sword by your lord. The sword taps your shoulders. There's an oath. There's blessing by the church. There's a feast afterward where people congratulate you. You feel nothing. Everyone's been telling you this would be the culmination of your efforts, the moment everything was building toward. You're supposed to feel honored. You're supposed to feel like you've achieved something. Instead, you feel empty. You've been doing everything this role requires for years. The ceremony is just a formality, making it official. The oath you take is about protecting the weak, serving your Lord faithfully, defending the church, speaking truth, fighting with honor. All these beautiful principles that you've already learned don't actually work in practice. You took them seriously during training. Now you're cynical about them. You'll say the words. You'll mean some of them, but you're not naive enough to believe in all of them anymore. The title changes nothing about your daily life. You're still serving Sir Aldwin. You're still training. You're still doing the same work. Except now you have more status, which means you're expected to be more perfect, which means the standards are higher and the punishment for failure is greater. But you are a knight now. You can own land. You can have vassals. You can command other soldiers. These things are hypothetical right now. You don't actually have land or vassals yet. But eventually, if Sir Aldwin's lord is generous, you might receive a small estate, a few villages, farmland, tenants who are legally bound to serve you. This is the promised reward. This is what you've been working toward for 14 years. You're 24 when the kingdom's civil war starts. One of the major nobles has decided that the king is unfit and that he should be in charge instead. War breaks out. It's not quick. It's not contained to one region. It spreads across the kingdom. For years, there will be fighting somewhere. Sir Aldwin is called to serve. This isn't a siege where you're camped outside walls. This is open field combat. Armies meeting in fields. Knights charging each other. Real large-scale warfare. The night before your first major battle, you don't sleep. You're not the only one. Probably half the soldiers are awake, thinking about what's coming. The other half are too drunk to sleep. Before dawn, the trumpets sound. Everyone moves into position. The two armies face each other across a field. There's a moment of waiting that lasts forever and no time at all. Then someone gives a signal, and the charge begins. The cavalry charge is terrifying and exhilarating and terrible all at once. You're on your horse. You're gripping a lance. You're accelerating toward another human being who's also accelerating toward you at full speed. The ground shakes from thousands of hooves. The noise is overwhelming. You're all riding toward each other to try to kill each other. The impact is bone-jarring. Your lance hits the man in front of you, and it explodes into splinters. The force throws you backward in the saddle, but you stay mounted. The man in front of you falls. You don't see whether he's dead or just knocked down. You're already moving past him, dealing with the next enemy. Cavalry charges usually break one side or the other. Either the defending line holds and the chargers have to pull back, or the line breaks and the chargers have the advantage. In this case, your line holds better than theirs. They're retreating. The cavalry continues forward, pressing the advantage. Then the fighting becomes melee. Mounted knights fighting other mounted knights. Swords and axes and maces. It's chaotic and confusing. You can barely see through your helmet visor. The noise makes it impossible to hear orders. You're fighting on instinct, reacting to threats, trying to stay alive. You kill someone. You're not sure how or exactly when. A man on a horse is attacking you, and then he's not. There's blood on your sword. It might be yours. It might be his. You don't have time to figure out which. The battle lasts hours, or feels like it does. Actually, it's probably less than an hour. Large-scale medieval battles weren't long. They were intense and chaotic, and then one side or the other was clearly losing, and they'd break and run. In this case, your side wins. The enemy army breaks and flees. Your soldiers pursue them for a while, killing the ones who are too slow or too exhausted to run. Then it stops. You're not sure why. Maybe someone gives the order to stop pursuing. Maybe the horses are too exhausted to keep charging. Maybe it's just that the slaughter has reached some natural conclusion. When you pull off your helmet, you're covered in sweat. Your face is probably covered in blood. Whether it's yours or someone else's, you can't tell. Your hearing is muffled from the noise. Your hands are shaking. Sir Aldwin is alive. That's the first thing you check. He's alive and relatively unwounded. This is good. If he dies, you're responsible for keeping him alive, and you failed. Now comes the aftermath. The field is covered with bodies. Some are moving. Most aren't. The wounded are crying or moaning or trying to crawl. The dead are just still. There's a smell, blood, and sweat and shit, because people lose bowel control when they die. The soldiers who won are now engaged in looting the dead, stripping armor off bodies, taking weapons, taking anything valuable. This is their payment. They weren't paid to fight in this battle, and they probably won't be paid. But they can take what they find from enemy bodies. It's brutal but practical. You help Sir Aldwin remove his armor carefully. There's blood mixed with sweat, and the armor is stained and dented. You examine for cracks or serious damage. There are dents, but nothing structural seems broken. You'll spend the evening cleaning and repairing it. That night, you eat food that tastes like ash. You sleep if you can, though most of you lie awake thinking about the man you killed, and whether he had a family, and whether you feel guilty about it, or if you're too numb to feel anything. You survive the battle. You survive the next battle. And the next one. Years pass. You're now in your early 30s, and you've been in more battles than you can clearly count. You have scars all over your body. Some are from combat, some are from training, some are from accidents. But the biggest threat to your life isn't combat, it's disease. You develop dysentery 3 years after that first major battle. It starts in the gut, pain, cramping, then it progresses to severe diarrhea. You spend a lot of time in the latrine area feeling like you're dying. Your body is expelling everything, and you're becoming dangerously dehydrated. The camp physician, who is more herbalist than actual medical professional, tells you he needs to bleed you. This is the standard medical treatment for almost everything. Lay out some blood to balance your humors. You're not confident it will help, but you're desperate enough to try it. It doesn't help. It makes things worse. You lose blood on top of losing fluids through the diarrhea. Within a few days, you're so weak you can barely stand. You lose weight rapidly. Your skin hangs off your frame. You think about death casually. It seems like it might actually be coming. Then, over the course of a couple weeks, it slowly improves. Your body kills the dysentery through its own immune system. You recover, but you're not the same. Something about the dysentery damaged your digestive system. For months afterward, your stomach hurts constantly. Years later, you still have intermittent problems. You develop a respiratory infection that turns into pneumonia. Again, you're convinced you're dying. You're coughing up blood. You're burning with fever. The fever gets so high you become delirious. You have hallucinations. You see people who aren't there. You have conversations with people who are dead. You recover from this, but barely. The pneumonia leaves you weak for months. Your lung capacity is reduced. Years later, you still can't run without getting short of breath. You tire easily on the marches. You develop infected wounds that don't respond to treatment. A cut gets infected despite cleaning and treatment. The infection spreads. The physician wants to amputate the limb before the infection kills you. You refuse, knowing that amputation means the end of your career as a knight. You become a beggar. Your life would be over just with a slightly different ending. Slow poverty instead of quick death. You choose to risk death rather than face that future. You're actually in a privileged position. Most people don't get to make this choice. An infection spreading through a limb is death or amputation. There's no third option. But Sir Aldwin is wealthy enough that he can bring in additional physicians to try different treatments. They treat the infection with wine. Wine's not a perfect treatment, but it does have some antimicrobial properties. It's better than nothing. Slowly, the infection clears. You keep your limb, but you walk with a slight limp for the rest of your life. The infection scarred something in the muscle tissue. You develop boils. Not just a couple, an entire cluster of them on your back where your armor rubs. They're painful and they leak constantly. You have your squire. You have one now, a boy of 14 who reminds you of yourself. Change bandages constantly. Half your day is spent dealing with infected boils. You get infected lice bites that turn into serious infections. You develop abscesses in your mouth from dental disease. Your teeth are falling out. Dental problems are constant. Pain, infections, extraction via barber surgeons who are barely better than butchers. This is life now. You're constantly dealing with some kind of infection or illness. Your body is weakening. You're in your mid-30s and you feel like you're 60. Let's actually examine what the physical reality of being a medieval knight in your 30s looks like. You're missing 3 teeth. The holes are visible when you smile, so you've learned to not smile. Your remaining teeth are discolored from infections and decay. Your breath smells like rot because of the dental problems. You chew food with the teeth you still have, which means your digestion isn't as efficient as it was. You have a permanent limp from that infection in your leg. It's not dramatic enough that you can't fight or ride, but it's noticeable. You favor one leg. Years of this has twisted your hips slightly. Your shoulder sometimes dislocates if you move it wrong. A land strike years ago damaged it, and it never fully healed. You've learned to be careful about how you move. You've learned to reinforce it with extra padding and armor. You know that one day it'll probably dislocate during combat, and you'll die because you can't defend yourself properly. Your ribs have permanent damage. One of them didn't heal correctly, and now it clicks when you move. It doesn't usually hurt, but sometimes it does. When you take a deep breath, you hear and feel the click. You have other ribs that have small hairline fractures that never fully healed because you kept re-injuring them in subsequent battles. Your knees are starting to fail. They ache in the morning. They ache after a long ride. They ache in winter especially. The cartilage is worn down. The joints are inflamed. A physician told you years ago that you're developing arthritis, though he used older terminology. You're aware that your knees are probably going to get significantly worse as you get older. Your back is permanently curved. Years of wearing 60 to 90 pounds of armor has modified your spine. You're not dramatically hunchbacked or anything, it's subtle, but you're noticeably bent forward compared to how you used to be. You're also shorter. You were probably 5'8" or 9 as a young man. Now you're probably 5'6" or 7 from spinal compression. You have scars covering your body, on your arms, on your legs, on your torso. One scar runs from your collarbone to your chest from a sword strike that was deflected just enough not to kill you. Another scar is on your thigh from a cut that went deep enough to hit muscle. Your face has a scar on your cheek from a close encounter with an axe. Your hands are covered in small scars from decades of combat and training. You have constant chronic pain. Some parts are worse than others. Your shoulders are worst. Constant ache. Your knees are bad. Your back is bad. Various other joints are sore. You're not incapacitated by it, but it's there. It's background noise that never goes away. You have memory gaps. You can't quite remember when certain injuries happened. The trauma and the passage of time have blurred events together. You remember major battles, but smaller skirmishes blur together. You remember killing people, but the faces are often generic. You can't remember their specific features. You have nightmares. Not constant nightmares, but frequent ones. You wake up sometimes covered in sweat, your heart pounding, having just relived some combat scenario. You've been doing this for over a decade, and it hasn't gotten better. You're drinking regularly now. Not constantly drunk, but you drink every evening. Wine mostly, sometimes stronger spirits. You drink to help you sleep. You drink to make the pain bearable. You drink to make the memories less vivid. This is normal. Almost every night drinks regularly. The alcohol helps everyone cope. By the time you're 35, your Lord has granted you land. It's not huge. A few villages, some farmland, maybe 100 families who owe you service. It's enough to be respectable. It's enough to get you married. The marriage is arranged. Your bride is a daughter of another knight, a political alliance that makes sense to both families. She's 17. You're 35. The age difference is normal for the time, but it means you're a stranger to her and she's terrified of you. You try to be gentle on the wedding night, but you're not really equipped for tenderness. You've spent decades training to be a weapon. Gentleness doesn't come naturally. The marriage is consummated, but not particularly successful. She cries quietly afterward. You pretend not to notice. Your wife's name is Eleanor. She's intelligent. She has opinions. Over months and years, you grow to genuinely like her, even if love is too strong a word. She manages your estate while you're away. She writes you letters. Some of them make you emotional, though you'd never admit that to anyone. She gets pregnant. You're at war, and you get word that you have a daughter. You've never met her. By the time the war ends and you return home, she's 3 months old. She looks nothing like you thought. She's tiny and fragile, and completely dependent on others for survival. You don't know how to interact with her. Your hands are scarred and rough. You're a killer. This child is vulnerable. These things don't go together. Eleanor teaches you how to hold her properly. She tells you about the pregnancy and the birth, which sounds horrifying. Blood and pain and the constant fear that something would go wrong. You listen to her describe it and you feel grateful you didn't have to experience it, which is absurd because pregnancy and childbirth is actually dangerous and women die from it relatively frequently. You spend a few months with your family, but then there's a call to arms again. More warfare somewhere. Your Lord needs you. You have to leave. Eleanor doesn't say anything, but you see the disappointment in her face. She's managing the estate alone. She's raising a child alone. and now you're leaving again. The separation becomes normal. Years pass in a pattern. You're home for a few months, then you're away for months or sometimes a year at a time. Your daughter grows up barely knowing you. By the time you see her again, she's changed. She's walking when you last saw her, and now she can talk. She's learned things you didn't teach her. She has memories of you that you can't remember making because you weren't there. You have a son eventually. You're home for his birth. You actually get to experience some of his infancy. But then, when he's 2, another war starts and you're gone for 2 years. You come back, and he barely recognizes you. He's afraid of this large, scary man in armor. You take him out to the training yard to teach him about horses and swords. He's interested but also scared. You're too rough with him without meaning to be. Eleanor has to tell you to be gentler. You adjust, but it doesn't feel natural. This is one of the invisible costs of knighthood. It damages your relationships with your family. You're trained to be distant and controlled, to prioritize duty over emotion. These traits are valuable on a battlefield. They're catastrophic in a marriage and as a parent. Eleanor loves you, you think, but you're not always there. She respects you, but she's also resentful. She manages the estate competently and doesn't need you. She raises the children mostly alone. You provide financially and you produce heirs. And that's honestly all that's expected of you. But there's something missing. Something broken that could have been fixed if you'd been present more. You're 45 years old. You're not old. Many people who survive to 45 still have decades left. But you feel old. Your body feels old. More importantly, your mind feels old. You've been in battle for over 20 years. You've killed dozens of people. You watched many friends die. You've had injuries that have never fully healed. You've had diseases that have left permanent damage. You've been drinking for decades. You've been under constant stress. The accumulated weight of all of this is becoming noticeable. You don't have the physical endurance you used to have. You can't ride for as long before your legs ache. You can't fight for as long before you're exhausted. You're making mistakes in combat that you wouldn't have made 10 years ago. Worse, you're becoming aware that you're not as mentally sharp as you used to be. You're forgetting things. Simple things. You'll forget what you were going to do or say mid-sentence. You have moments of confusion where you're not sure what day it is or what season. You sometimes can't quite remember people's names even though you've known them for years. Younger knights are starting to edge you out. They're faster. They're stronger. They're hungrier. They have better reflexes and better memory. In tournaments, you're not winning anymore. You're placing but not winning. The gap is getting wider. You're being consulted less in military planning. Your experience is still respected, but the younger commanders are making the actual decisions. You're becoming a figure that people respect more for what you represented in the past than for what you can contribute now. This is depressing in ways that are hard to articulate. You've defined yourself as a warrior for so long that having your identity eroded is devastating. You're not a young warrior anymore. You're becoming an old warrior, which is just a different way of saying you're becoming obsolete. You're 60 years old. This is actually quite old for a medieval knight. Most don't make it this far. You've defied the odds through luck or good genetics or just stubbornness. But your body is failing now. Seriously failing. Your arthritis is so bad that some mornings you can barely get out of bed. Your hands shake sometimes from nerve damage. Your hearing is diminished. You missed a command in your last battle because you couldn't hear it. You've had a stroke. Or at least the symptoms suggest a stroke. Partial paralysis on one side of your body that gradually improved but didn't fully resolve. You're weaker on your left side now. You have a slight slur when you talk if you're tired. You have infections that keep recurring. Your body's immune system is shot from decades of infections and stress. You get sick easily now. A cold that another person shrugs off leaves you bedridden. Your mind is going. You have entire days that you can't quite remember clearly. You lose time. You find yourself in places without quite remembering getting there. You have trouble finding words sometimes. Your thoughts aren't as sharp. Eleanor is patient with you, mostly. She's aged too, though she's aged better than you have. She's in her late 40s, still strong, still competent. She manages everything because you're not capable anymore. You know this. You resent it slightly and are grateful for it simultaneously. Your children are grown. Your daughter is married and managing another estate. Your son took over managing your lands probably 10 years ago when it became clear you weren't going to recover the mental sharpness to do it. He's a good administrator, better than you would have been if you'd been able to manage it. But you feel like you failed him somehow by not being there more when he was growing up. You don't fight anymore. Your lord stopped calling you to war about 5 years ago. You're not insulted by this. You know you're not capable anymore. But it's strange to not have warfare as the center of your life. Without it, what are you? Who are you if you're not a soldier? You're just a man now. An old, damaged man with a lot of scars and a lot of memories and not much future. At 65, you're very ill. You've had another stroke. This one took more from you. Your left arm doesn't work properly. You can barely walk. You spend most of your time in bed. Eleanor sits with you. She's your constant companion now. She reads to you. She makes sure you're comfortable. She does this without resentment, which somehow makes you feel worse. You've been gone for most of her adult life, and she's still taking care of you. You have time to think now. Too much time. You think about the 14-year-old boy who was sent to the castle. You think about what you expected your life to be and what it actually became. You think about Sir Aldwin. He's been dead for 10 years now. He lived to 58, which was not actually that old, but he was worn out by then. Worn out by everything. He didn't recover from his last wound the way he would have recovered when he was younger. You think about all the people you knew who didn't make it past their 30s or 40s. The diseases that killed them, the wounds that got infected, the accidents that happened, the depression that led some to suicide, the alcoholism that destroyed some, the simple wear and tear of living a warrior's life. You think about the oath you took. Protect the weak. Defend the church. Speak truth. Fight with honor. You did some of these things. You failed at others. You're not proud of everything you did. You're not ashamed either. Exactly. You did what you were trained to do. You survived. Most people didn't. You think about whether it was worth it. If you could go back to that 7-year-old boy and give him a choice, would you tell him to accept being sent to the castle or to run away? You don't have a clear answer. Running away would have been terrible. You would have been hunted and killed or captured. But this life, a life of pain and trauma and separation from family, is it better than that? You realize you don't have a real answer. You just know that you survived. You provided for your family. You became someone significant in your world. But the cost was higher than you ever understood when you started. Part 13, the institutional reality, the system that created you. Looking back, you understand something about the system that trained you. It wasn't designed to create warriors out of cruelty. It was designed to create warriors because warriors were necessary. Kingdoms needed soldiers. The feudal system depended on having an armed class that could fight and defend territory. But the process for creating these warriors was brutal because it had to be. You couldn't teach a boy to ignore pain gently. You couldn't teach him to kill without showing him violence. You couldn't teach him to prioritize duty over emotion without separating him from his family. The system was harsh because kindness would have made you weak, and weakness meant death. In a way, everyone involved understood this. The nobles who sent their children away understood that they were sending them to a difficult place. The masters who trained you understood that they were preparing you for something that would probably kill you. Sir Aldwin understood that he was training you for trauma. But there was no language for what was happening. There was no concept of PTSD or psychological damage. There was no framework for understanding that the human mind could be damaged in ways that didn't show physically. Everyone just accepted that this was how warriors were made. This was the cost of having an armed class. And it worked. It created soldiers. It created people who could function through extreme stress, through pain, through fear. People who could make rational decisions while being attacked. People who could follow orders even when those orders led to death. But it also created broken people. People who drank to cope. People who had nightmares. People who struggled with intimacy and relationships. People whose bodies were destroyed by the time they were 40. You're not unique. You're one of thousands of knights across the medieval world. Each one of them has scars. Each one of them has experienced trauma. Each one of them has sacrificed health and happiness for duty. And these damaged people are the ones making decisions that affect nations. These traumatized warriors are leading armies. These broken men are advising kings. Is it any wonder that medieval warfare is brutal? Is it any wonder that mercy is rare? These are people who've been trained to dehumanize their enemies and ignore their own pain. Of course, they're brutal. But also, these damaged people are also managing estates, raising families, trying to maintain civilizations. They're doing this while dealing with unprocessed trauma and chronic pain and psychological damage. The wonder is that medieval society functions at all, not that it's sometimes chaotic and brutal. Why spend all this time describing the misery of being a medieval knight? It's not just historical curiosity. It's not just morbid interest in how awful things were in the past. It matters because we romanticize the past. We look at knights and we see honor and glory. We read stories about noble quests and righteous battles. We ignore the reality underneath. The reality is that we did this to people. We took children away from their families and trained them to be weapons. We subjected them to violence and pain and trauma. We created PTSD before we had a word for it. We sacrificed their health and happiness, and sometimes their lives, to maintain a political and military system. And then we didn't even acknowledge the cost. The trauma was invisible. The psychological damage was just accepted as normal. The men who came back broken were expected to function normally, to manage estates, to raise families, to be good citizens, all while their minds were screaming. It matters because understanding this gives us perspective. It shows us what warfare actually costs, not just in terms of lives lost, though that matters, but in terms of the damage done to survivors. Medieval knights experienced trauma that would be recognized today as severe PTSD. They had no mechanism to process it. They just had to endure it. It matters because we still do this. Not with medieval knights anymore, but we still train people to be warriors. We still separate them from their families. We still subject them to violence and trauma. We still expect them to function normally when they come back. We've made a little bit of progress. We at least acknowledge PTSD now, but we still romanticize warfare and sacrifice. The medieval knight is a historical figure now, but the point he exemplifies is timeless. The cost of warfare is paid by the people who do the fighting, and that cost is often invisible and often denied. You die at 68. It's not dramatic. You have another stroke, and your body simply fails. You had probably another year or two in you, but your body decides it's done. You stop breathing, and the suffering ends. Eleanor grieves, though not dramatically. She's aged too. She has her own health problems now. She manages her grief with dignity and proceeds with the business of being a widow. Your son inherits your lands. Your daughter maintains her own estate. Life goes on. Within a generation, people forget most of the details about who you were. You're just a name on a genealogy. Lord, your name, Knight, died in 1297 or whenever it was. The specifics of your suffering are lost. All that remains is the title. But you mattered. Your sacrifice mattered. Your suffering mattered. The scars and pain and trauma and loss, all of it was real. All of it was the price paid for being a medieval knight. And nobody ever told you it was worth it. You were just trained to accept it and endure it and continue on. That was the medieval knight. Not the hero on horseback in shining armor. The man in pain, covered in scars, psychologically damaged, far from home, dealing with a body that was breaking down faster than it should have. The man who was trained to ignore suffering and then had to live with the consequences of that training for decades. If you were transported back to medieval times and became a knight, this is what you would experience. Not glory, not honor, pain and suffering and loss and slowly accumulating damage until the day you died. That's the reality that no one sells you. That's the story that nobody tells in songs. That is what it actually sucked to be a medieval knight.